this isn't just any old Tesla Model 3, it's the new and improved version. And while it looks pretty much exactly the same as the old car, there are lots of small little upgrades that Tesla hopes will make the Model 3 even more irresistible than it already is. Now, the Model 3 used to have the market kind of all to itself really, but there are lots of new players, including the absolutely fantastic Polestar 2. So is the Model 3 still king now it's got all of these upgrades? Well, today I'm going to find out. But before I get into this very in-depth review, remember to hit the like button and subscribe for more awesome videos just like this one. We're all pretty familiar with the Model 3's design, and this updated model doesn't really look any different to the old car. But if you look closely, there are some subtle differences. So the older model actually came with LED headlights as standard, but on this updated one, these are LED matrix headlights, which is a little bit brighter and a bit sharper. And you can actually see the difference if you look really closely. The LEDs have got a slightly different design when you look at it from down at this angle. But I'd say probably the most obvious change of all of them is actually the change of the trim. So on the previous car, you had chrome trim around the windows and also on the door handles, but on this new car, it's satin black or matte black. It's also around the camera here as well. Now, some people like it, some people dislike it. I think it's a bit of a shame that this is the only option that you're stuck with. If you wanted the chrome look, it's a shame that that's not offered as an optional extra. But personally, I quite like the look of this black. I think it looks pretty smart. Now, the wheels down here, we've got the long range, and these are the standard wheels on the long range. They're 18 inches, and I don't think they've changed all that much from the previous version. You can get slightly bigger 19-inch wheels for £1,100, but if you go for the performance, there's an all-new 20-inch design, and we'll put up an image of that right now. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Do you prefer it, or do you like these kind of retro look, which I really like? Now that's about it really for the visual changes. You've got the same kind of design as before, but the Model 3 is almost like an iPhone really, of where it's a really timeless design. This still looks like a cool modern car, even though it's a couple of years old now. It's the same as the Model S. It's been around for 9 years, but it just doesn't age. Still looks fantastic. Now onto the more mechanical aspects of the changes to the Model 3. So all cars now come with a power-assisted tailgate, which is really, really handy, and it makes it feel like a much more modern car. Now, one of the problems on the previous generations is if it was raining and you open the boot, the drainage was quite bad, so you'd have loads of water that would just spill into the boot. Now, I can't test any of the upgrades today because for once in the UK, it's actually a beautiful day. But there's actually a little extra drainage around the base of the rear window, so hopefully now your luggage won't get soaked if it's peeing with rain. As for the boot itself, it's the same as the previous Model 3. It's massive and it's bigger than that of what you get on the Polestar 2. The only difference really between this and a Polestar 2, obviously apart from the size, is that this is a saloon or sedan boot lid, but what we get on a Polestar 2 is a hatch, so the rear window will also go with the boot as well. And kind of like the Polestar 2, or I think we've got a little bit more on this, we've got loads of underfloor storage where we've actually got, you can chuck away the charging cables really without having to worry about it. But this is a Tesla. You don't just have a boot in the back, you also have a frunk. Now the frunk or front trunk of this newer Model 3 is actually a teeny tiny bit smaller than the older version, and there's a reason for that. On this new car, Tesla has fitted a heat pump. Now what that does is it helps heat up the cabin in a more energy efficient way. So if you're wanting to get warm, you won't sap as much battery as you would on the older car. Still, you've got plenty of storage down here, so if you wanted to use more of that bin in the back of the car, you could just chuck your charging cables in here. Damn, didn't close. There we go. Now the changes continue on the inside, and it's all highlighted by this nice new center console, which is not only a little bit shinier to make it a bit more premium, but the actual design has changed itself. So on the old car, you would actually have a lid covering up the 2 wireless phone charging slots at the top of the center console. But on here, it doesn't exist anymore. So if you want to charge your phone, just simply slot it in. And it's a really nice and neat design as well. I've not seen it on any other car, and it just looks really good in a Model 3. Now, you've still got that massive storage bin like you had on the old car, but it's now just hidden behind a sleeker lid, and it's really very deep as well. There are also 2 USB ports in there. They're USB-C, so if you want to connect up a storage device, you can actually record footage from all the cameras that are dotted all around the car. Now, that's just touching on all the different updates on this new Model 3, but I think it's probably best if we compare it to an old car. So we're here with independent EV specialist R. Symons, and we have none other than the Tesla expert, Richard Symons. Welcome to the channel.
Hi Cam, no problem. Yeah, this is great. Not too much I don't know about a Tesla, I'd like to think. I've been an owner for 5 years, and as you can see, it's what we do. We deal in Teslas day in, day out. So good to have you here, and happy to talk through the differences on these cars.
So what's really cool is that, as we've seen so far, we have the latest version of the Model 3, but Richard's very kindly brought along a pre-updated version right here, and we can actually see some of the differences we mentioned about earlier. So I think the first one is the headlights, isn't it?
Yeah, so this was a few months older, so this is what we call the pre-refresh, and it has LED headlights. They're perfectly good, they're absolutely fine. If you look really closely, and you get right in there, you will see these have a slightly different headlight, LED, but LED matrix. I guess the point to note with these is at the moment they don't do any clever kind of shadowing, cornering, but you know how Tesla works, software updates over the air. Probably at some point we'll see some more functionality to them.
And have you used both, and can you see kind of a big difference between the two?
There is, yeah, there's a much squarer beam pattern to the refresh car. These are pretty good, as long as you adjust them right, they're pretty good, but these have got a much more defined square pattern to them. And I think especially when we see some functionality to them, which we can only assume will happen, then they'll then be a fair improvement over the previous one. So it's good to see.
I think that the next big visual difference, of course, is we've now got, on this one, matte black, or satin black if you want to be posh, highlights around the side camera and also around the doors and also the door handles. But on the previous car, we've got chrome.
This is chrome around the windows, the handles. Now, one thing I will say is with the black handles at night, you cannot really see them. They've got no lights on them, so you find yourself putting around a little bit. The chrome tends to at least pick up a bit of light. There's a bit of a topic of debate. Some people prefer the D-chrome, some people prefer the chrome. Probably welcome any comments below on any preferences either way. So a topic of debate, there's no option to choose one or the other, which would probably be a nice thing to have, really.
Yeah, and I'm not sure which one I prefer in all fairness, because I do kind of like the matte black look. And I think finding the handle hasn't been too bad when you've got a nice red car like this. But if you've got one of the black ones, it's probably like shoving your hand into a solid shadow. Wheels on these long-range ones, I don't think they're different, are they? Or have we got
There's tiny difference in these aero covers and the wheels, but so tiny you're probably never really going to pick off the difference. But they are ever so slightly different, just with the shape of them. The sizes are exactly the same, yeah. So there's some subtle changes. You will see a little bit of difference with the shape of the front. And you used to have these nice little shopping bag hooks. They've gone.
Yeah.
Cost saving.
So I can see, if you bring it in a little bit further in here, David, you've kind of got a slightly kind of thinner, I'm not sure even what you'd call that. Basically, we've got a bit more room, just a smidgen more storage in the front of the pre-updated one compared to what we have in here. But still, it's not a massive difference, really, is it?
It's not massive, yeah. It's small. No carpets. You used to sometimes get carpets in the front of these, but not much difference in size. Just losing these bag hooks, really.
Yeah.
But I can't say it was a regular occurrence to use a bag hook in here. If I had to take away, I wasn't going to open the dirty front. So, yeah, no. Not much difference there.
I think as well, if you've got something like it may compromise front space just a teeny tiny bit, but if you're getting more battery power, then it's going to be worth it, really.
Yeah, we've run some comparison tests between the pre-refresh cars without the heat pump and the ones with the heat pump, and it makes a little bit of difference, which is exactly what you'd expect. So, especially in the colder weather, we see a benefit to having the cars with the heat pump, and every little bit helps. So, yeah, it's a good step in the right direction.
So, but what's also really interesting, and we haven't really talked about this yet, is now Tesla is obviously expanding massively, and the Model 3 is also produced in China now.
Yes.
So the cars that we have here are made at their main facility in Fremont, correct? But you've actually got your hands on a Chinese car, and we don't unfortunately have it here because you sold it very quickly. But I was wondering if you could just talk us through some of the differences between the cars made in China and the ones made in America, because they're quite significant.
Yes, we saw some changes. There's been quite a lot of debate over whether the Chinese ones would be any better or worse quality. So we had one here and we compared it to all the cars we have. And it certainly didn't seem any worse. There were some signs of improvement, and we'll be doing some more tests on that soon on our channel, measuring paint thickness and really going into the technical details. But the made in China car, to most people, you'd have trouble telling them apart from the last of the Fremont cars. The main difference really was that the trim from the dashboard now carries around into the doors.
Let's go take a look at what that would look like.
The topic of heated steering wheel. So the China-made cars have a heated steering wheel. Perhaps these last of the Fremont cars do have a heated steering wheel and be released with a software update. But essentially, the made in China dashboard, into the door cards, and a heated steering wheel now on the long-range cars and the performance cars. So
what we have, as Richard so expertly pointed out there, is that on the Fremont cars we've got the kind of wooden panel that runs along the width of the dash, but not here. But on the cars made in China, it actually continues round here a little bit for a slightly more premium, luxurious look. I guess if that's something that you're after, then you'll get that on a car if you buy it in the UK. If I remember rightly, there's also a slight change in the design of the speakers.
The door cards are different, and not much. You're going to have trouble telling them apart, but the door cards do seem different between even the latest cars made in Fremont and the cars now coming from China. Reason unknown at the moment. There are talks about maybe noise cancelling, maybe there's different speakers for that. We tested the cars side by side. Could they sound any better or different? Couldn't really pick them apart, to be honest. Actually, at the time, everyone we tested in the China car thought that it wasn't quite as good a sound quality as the newer cars. But it's a brand new car and speakers need to bed in. So we'll have to find out a little bit more about that. Maybe it's just to accommodate these trims, although the back door cards are different as well. Just subtle changes that evolve over time, which you do typically get with Tesla. They're always evolving, to be honest.
And as you pointed out as well, if you were to go and pick up one of these updated Model 3s that were made in the US, it doesn't come with a heated steering wheel as standard.
Not yet.
Not yet. But you can get one if you've got one of the Chinese-made ones.
Correct.
And if I'm right, it's the Chinese cars that are going to be sold in the UK from around March, April time.
Yeah, all the new Model 3s now, from the 1st of March was the first day. So all the new Model 3s in the UK now, all the right-hand drive, are probably going to be made in China. We've got a delay until we receive the shipments of the Performance. Will the Performance be made in China as well? Will they come from Fremont? Different battery, remember? So we'll wait and see on that, but standard range, long range cars now seem to be coming from China, predominantly because of right-hand drives. Shanghai factory seems to be geared up for right-hand drive production to a large degree. So whether the rest of Europe with left-hand drive will also come from China or Fremont is, I think, to be decided at the time we're filming this.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, things just change so quickly, particularly in the world of Tesla, that we could point out all the changes here, and you might find that within the next few weeks or so, something's been updated. Now, as you've driven both and you've been in both, can you tell a difference? Are people kind of lucking out more with a China-built car than one made in the US?
No, basically. The two long-range cars we have here and then the long-range I had from China, nothing you can tell the difference inside. So the revised car like you have here
Yeah.
includes that double pane glass, although I can't really see a difference with that, to be honest. But they all drive much the same.
Yeah.
Remember, Tesla's about kind of continuous, more subtle refinements. I guess in the newer cars, you've got that heat pump makes a little bit of difference, but whether this is China or non-China, you wouldn't be able to tell apart, I don't think, no.
Well, Richard, thank you very much for running over the differences between the two cars. Now, we really are only just scratching the surface, particularly with the differences of these new cars and also the ones made in China. So if you want a proper breakdown of these new Chinese cars, head over to Richard's channel, which is RSEV on YouTube.
Yeah, if you go on YouTube, R. Symons, RSEV is a bit easier to remember. And we've gone into some more in-depth comparisons. I've got tape measures and rulers out and going into more in-depth comparisons side by side between the earlier cars, the refresh cars, and then the China cars.
It is magnificent. This is really why Richard is the expert. And I'll also link to that in the description as well, so you can get it to it nice and easily. Right, thanks, Richard. Back to the review. We're back in the Model 3, and something I really wanted to point out after doing all of these updates is just what a brilliant feeling car this Model 3 is. And this does go for the previous generations as well. Tesla has really upped their game in terms of build quality. So one of the first cars I ever drove as a journalist was the original Tesla Model S, and it was an amazing piece of technology, but bearing in mind that it was quite an expensive car, I didn't really feel like the high price tag was justified because it felt really cheap inside. But honestly, this Model 3 feels fantastic. The wood finish across the dashboard feels really very lovely. All the leather wrapped around the armrest and the seats are really nice and really soft. Even the doors, there's no cheap plastic anywhere. It all feels like a really nice premium product. It's not quite up to the quality in what you get on something like a BMW or an Audi, and I still kind of prefer the overall design of the Polestar 2's cabin, but this is just a huge improvement on what we saw with some of the early Tesla cars. Now, if you're new to the Model 3, you may have noticed that there's no dials in front of the steering wheel, and that's because everything, and I mean everything pretty much, is controlled on this beautiful touchscreen display. Now, if you've seen some of my other reviews, particularly of some new VW products, you'll know that I'm not really a fan of these infotainment systems that are basically control every aspect of the car, because I feel like they're a little bit dangerous if you're driving along and you have to do all sorts of gestures to get the car to work. However, that's partly because they're engineered really badly. They feel sluggish, they feel janky, and they're really not very nice to use. Whereas this has been developed by a tech company, and it's so obvious because it just feels so much nicer than any system that's out there. Look at this, it just looks like one massive iPad, and it really does control everything. So first of all, if you're driving along, your speed appears in the top right-hand corner, and it's right in your eye line, so it doesn't necessarily take your eyes off the road all that much. It's no different than if you were to have a regular instrument cluster in front of you. Then, of course, the sat-nav sits very proudly right here, and it's Google Maps, so it's really, really very good. It's got all the locations you could want on it. And going about is very simple, but it'll also route you it will put you on routes that basically have more Tesla superchargers on them. So basically you'll never have to worry about running out of juice on your drive. So that's really cool. And what you might also see here as well is we've got a graphic of the car and we can actually tap on these to open the front bonnet or the frunk or the boot. So if I hit that, there's a big thud, and it's because the bonnet has opened. How cool is that? I absolutely love it. There's also we've got a sub menu up here. Oh, we can see so much energy usage if you're a bit of a geek and want to see all of that stuff. We've also got, we can go on the internet, cameras too. So it's got the rear facing camera. So if you're reversing, that's what you'll see. And it is the clearest one on the market. Honestly, makes such a big difference when you're reversing. It looks absolutely fantastic. I love that. Now, the climate controls are quite simple. You can just simply increase or decrease it from here. We can also whack on the heated seats if we want to. It's all quite simple. You've got the really key shortcuts there. But if you want to go into the more in-depth menus, you just hit the fan here. And then you can even change the direction of where the air comes from. So it's all done, it's all integrated into this kind of small little vent that runs all the way across the width of the dash, and then you can change where it comes out of on here with this beautiful graphic. And it's all running, I think, probably around 60 frames per second, or I'm not sure if it's 90 or 120 FPS, but it's really slick, so much better than any stuff that you'll find in most car makers. Even the glove box has to be opened on the infotainment display, so I can't just reach over and open it. I have to go into the Tesla menu, and then I've got to scroll all the way down to the glove box button and open it that way. It seems a tad unnecessary in all fairness. But with that aside, you've got some really cool, fun features in here. So Tesla's known for hiding lots of Easter eggs in its software, and before you used to have to go digging for them, but now Tesla knows that everybody loves accessing them. So on this latest software version, all you have to do is go into the main menu, go to Toy Box, and then you've got loads of different things to go through. So if, let's say, we wanted to play a prank on anybody in the car, I can put a whoopee cushion under the seats and we can just move it around. I've got fart on demand, which is brilliant. Or I could do a fart with the turn signal, but if I were to go on here, why can't... Oh, there we go. Oh, that's how we do it. Right, okay. So we've got, you can have different modes for the fart. So this is currently an I'm so random. So you've got lots of different sounds. There's also a not a, what? How is that not a fart? Neurostink. Oh. We're in quite a busy car park here, and I think I'm getting quite a few looks. Anyway, if you want to play a prank on someone, you can hide a virtual whoopee cushion underneath them. Now, what I don't recommend doing is if you've got a date, putting a whoopee cushion under the passenger seat. But what you can do is light a fire in the Get Cozy menu. Of course, I'm just sat here by myself, so it just looks a bit weird, really. As I was expecting, there's loads of space in the back of the Model 3. So I'm 180 centimetres and I've got plenty of legroom, and the seat in front of me is in about the same position as my driver's seat. Headroom isn't too bad. I think that because we've got this quite low panoramic roof, it does cut into headroom just a little bit. So if you're 6 foot, you might find it a little bit of a squeeze back here, but I still think there's quite a bit of room to go, so it's not too bad. Now I've got 2 USB-C chargers in the back here, as well as a couple of vents. And it's about as nice as rear seats go. The only thing I'll say though is because it's an electric car, the floor is quite high and the seats are quite low. So my legs kind of stick up quite a lot. Now you'll find that companies like Volkswagen get around this by making the backs of the seat sit really low. But Tesla hasn't done that, so I would imagine on a long car journey it might get a little bit uncomfortable, but nothing too bad. If you think the Model 3 is all about the technology, then you'd be wrong, because this thing is such a great car to drive. It's so much fun because it feels a little bit alien when you get into it. It definitely doesn't feel like a conventional car. The steering wheel's a little bit smaller. The dashboard is almost non-existent because there's no instrument cluster in front of me. And it almost feels like you're driving a toy or something that just isn't a normal car, maybe a 1950s vision of what future motoring will be like. But that's by no means a bad thing. It feels like you're in something that is just so different to anything before, but is also really intuitive, despite having this massive touchscreen that has everything from your speed to your sat-nav. So let's get into what this is like to drive. And you know, electric cars aren't light cars. Batteries are really heavy. So even though the Model 3 isn't a very big car, it is quite heavy. But it really doesn't feel like it. A, because The batteries are nice and low. They're tucked underneath the cockpit. So I'm actually sat on top of them at the moment. But I think the people that worked on this chassis really know what they're doing, because I'm driving around on a very rural road and it is bumpy and tight, but this car just feels like an absolute breeze to drive. It feels like I'm driving a car in a computer game. It's that easy. So something that really set Tesla apart from the rest of the competition is its Autopilot. It's a suite of semi-autonomous driving modes. And while a lot of the competition has caught up now, I still feel like Tesla are the kings when it comes to it, particularly in terms of accessibility. So if I push down on the right stalk twice, we activate Autopilot, and you can see the little graphic come up in the center of the screen. Now what it's doing is it's managing the steering, the braking and accelerating for me, and it's monitoring the white lines at the side of the road. However, we're in the middle of the New Forest at the moment, and the white lines are almost non-existent, and it's doing quite an impressive job. But I need to keep my hands on the steering wheel, because if I take them off, so I've got a little warning down here on the screen that says apply some turning force, and then you get a blue flashing light. And so now we've done that, we'll put our hands back on the wheel. So now we're on a motorway with much more defined white lines, and it's having a much easier time. The only problem is some Autopilot features are limited in the UK. In fact, quite a lot are. So if you're in the US, you can actually get quite a lot of self-driving features, particularly around town, of kind of auto steering around bends, taking junctions, stopping at traffic lights. Unfortunately, we don't have that at the moment because of the really strict rules that are part of the EU. So one of the things I'm not all that fond of on Autopilot here is that I feel like it didn't give things like lorries and trucks as much room as I had wanted to. So for instance, I was overtaking a line of lorries this morning while coming out of London, and it was far too close to the white line on the left-hand side of the car than on the right. And so it didn't feel like the end of the world, but it did mean that I had to steer more into the lane, and that deactivated Autopilot. So I felt for a lot of the journey, I'd activate Autopilot for about 5 or 10 minutes and then need to disengage it again. You know what, electric cars really aren't all that light, but my goodness, this Model 3, it's great to drive. Wow, that is fast. That is really fast. What's also really great about these Teslas is when you're driving along, yes, you need to look in your mirrors, but you've also got a readout of the cars that are around you. So we've got a very slow car in front, but there's a car that's just about to overtake me on the right-hand side, and the cameras and sensors should pick it up. That is so cool. We see and hear about all this kind of interior safety tech and stuff that's going to save you from crashing, but this is such a great visual way of showing it. Now, if you click the link in the top right-hand corner, you can actually watch my review of the Polestar 2, which is the Model 3's biggest rival. And I don't really think it's going to turn many people away from the Model 3, because the Model 3 has just this huge following. But as someone who really loves driving, as driver's cars, the Polestar 2 is pretty special. But this Model 3 is pretty damn close. It's just a very different driving experience. What I will say though, in comparison to the Polestar 2, is this touchscreen is amazing when you're stationary, but on the go it's pretty damn complicated. It's probably a little bit easier to use on the motorway, particularly if you've not got a lot of people around, but here on a rural road where there are lots of not only cars around and people, but horses that could step out at any minute, I really can't take my eye off the road. And when everything is done on this touchscreen, it's just very, very challenging. Now, where I find the Polestar 2 has the slight edge there is that it's got a conventional instrument cluster. Yes, it's digital, but it works really, really well. But it also has a portrait, smaller infotainment screen that also has less functions on it. It's not nearly as customizable as what you have on a Model 3, but if you're not really into that, if you want a car to just do what a car does and just drive around, then I think the Polestar 2 just has the slight edge there. So let's talk about pricing. This long range comes in at about £47,000 and it sits technically in the middle of Tesla's lineup. So with it, we've got the biggest range of 360 miles, and you also have a dual motor configuration. So we've got a motor at the rear and a motor at the front. Together, they work together, and you can get a 0 to 62 time of, as I've said before, 4.2 seconds. Then there's the performance, the top range car. That's just shy of £60,000 before options. Again, it's a dual motor, but it is faster in a straight line, 3.1 seconds to 60, which is just nuts. But there's also an entry-level one called the standard range, which comes in at just over £40,000. And that's got a single motor sending power to the rear, and it's got a 0 to 60 time of over 5 seconds, which, I mean, that's not slow at all. That's still, if you look at a Volkswagen Golf R, 300 horsepower all-wheel drive, you're looking at around about just over or just around 5 seconds 0 to 60. So it's still a very, very, very fast car, that standard range. So yes, the Model 3 is an excellent car. It really is very, very good. But this new and improved version, well, it's just even better.